There is a specific kind of silence that feels less like peace and more like a secret. It's the heavy, suffocating kind of quiet that doesn't just mean no one is talking. It means something is being buried. I felt it the second I pushed open the front door of my mother's house that Tuesday in November. I didn't know it then, but I was stepping into the middle of a crime scene where the only weapon was a spreadsheet and the only victim was the woman who gave me life. The smell hit me before I even saw her. It was the scent of a house that had stopped breathing. Stale air, a faint, sharp note of something sour, and that particular metallic chill of a space that hasn't been heated in weeks. This was Hamilton, Ontario, in late November. The kind of cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, it settles into your marrow and refuses to leave until the spring thaw. I had driven 3 hours from Kingston, my heater blasting the whole way, only to find that my mother's home felt colder than the driveway. "Mom," I called out. My voice sounded too loud, too vital for the stillness of that hallway. She answered from the living room, but it wasn't the voice of the woman I knew. It was thin, brittle. "In here, Daniel." I found her in the armchair by the window, the one my father used to sit in. She was buried under 2 heavy wool blankets, but that wasn't the worst part. She was wearing her winter coat. Inside, in the house she had lived in for 31 years. The television, which usually hummed with the news, was the dead black square. The curtains were drawn nearly shut, leaving only a sliver of gray afternoon light to cut through the gloom. In that dim light, she looked like a shadow of herself. My mother, Sylvia Okafor Brennan, was a woman of substance. She had been a secondary school librarian for nearly 3 decades. She was the woman who could command a room of rowdy teenagers with a single look. She was the person who navigated her way through a master's degree while raising 2 kids. Now she looked diminished, small, like someone had been slowly erasing her around the edges. "Why is it so cold in here, Mom? Is the furnace broken?" I asked, my hand already moving toward the thermostat on the wall. "It's fine," she said, her voice trembling just enough for me to notice. "I have my blankets. I'm quite cozy, really." I looked at the digital display. 14°C. In a Canadian November. That isn't a temperature. It's an icebox. I pushed the button to raise it, expecting the roar of the furnace, but my mother's voice stopped me. "Daniel, don't. The heating, it costs a lot. We have to be careful." She said it with a rehearsed cadence, like a child reciting a poem they didn't quite understand. It wasn't her thought. It was a line someone had fed her. I stood there, my finger hovering over the plastic button, feeling a slow, cold dread beginning to coil in my stomach. Have you ever had that feeling where you realize the world has tilted on its axis, but you're the only one who noticed? I didn't argue. Not yet. I walked into the kitchen, telling myself I was just going to make her a cup of tea, but I knew what I was really doing. I was looking for evidence. I opened the refrigerator. The light flickered on, illuminating a wasteland. A plastic tub of margarine with a single scrape left at the bottom. 3 eggs sitting in a cardboard carton. Half a liter of milk that was 48 hours away from turning sour. A jar of pickles. That was it. No meat, no vegetables, no fruit. In the cupboard, I found a bag of rice, a single tin of tomato soup, and a box of crackers that was nearly empty. On the counter, a lone orange sat in a ceramic bowl, one side of it collapsing into a soft blue-gray mold. My mother received a pension of $7,200 every single month. She had 27 years of service with the school board. She had my father's survivor benefits. She brought in more money than most young families in this city, and yet her kitchen looked like a Depression-era pantry. How does a woman with $7,000 a month end up with 3 eggs and a moldy orange? I went back into the living room and sat on the ottoman facing her. I reached out and took her hands. They were ice cold, and they were thin, so thin I could feel the delicate architecture of her bones through her skin. These were the hands that had held me through every childhood fever, the hands that had packed 10,000 lunches and shelved 1,000,000 books. Now they were shaking. "Mom," I said, trying to keep the shaking out of my own voice. "When did you last have a real meal? Not soup, not crackers. A meal." She looked past me, toward the sliver of gray light in the window. "I had soup yesterday. It was very filling, Daniel. I don't want to make a fuss. You know how prices are these days. Everything is so expensive. You have a pension, Mom, a good one. Where's the money?" The silence came back then, heavier than before. Outside, a car tires hissed against the wet pavement and the sound faded into nothing. Finally, she spoke. and her words felt like a physical blow to my chest. Trevor handles the finances, she whispered. Since your father died, he said it was easier. He said I shouldn't have to worry about bills and payments and all of that. He said it was his way of looking after me. Trevor Ashe, my sister Pauline's husband, a man who always wore expensive shoes and talked about market volatility at Sunday dinners. I want to be honest with you. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was a sickening, retroactive guilt. I had known Trevor was helping her. Pauline had mentioned it a year and a half ago. Trevor's sorting Mom's accounts, she'd said, and I had been relieved. I lived 3 hours away. I had a demanding job, 2 kids, a mortgage. I had thought, thank God, someone is handling it. I had trusted my family. Is there any betrayal worse than the one that wears the mask of help? I didn't go back to Kingston that night. I stayed. I went out and bought $200 worth of groceries. I bought steaks, fresh greens, heavy cream, bread that smelled like a bakery, and a heater for her bedroom. While I cooked, I watched her. She ate like someone who hadn't seen real food in weeks, slowly, almost apologetically, as if she were stealing it. Over the course of that night, the story began to leak out in pieces. It started 2 months after my father's funeral. Trevor had sat her down with a stack of papers. He told her she was in no state to manage the complexity of the estate. He told her he would automate everything. He had her sign a form to have her pension redirected into a new account. For administrative efficiency, he'd called it. From that account, Trevor would transfer her a household allowance of $300 a month. $300 for food, for heat, for life. While $7,000 flowed into an account he controlled. He would show her spreadsheets sometimes, vast, confusing grids of numbers that made her head swim. He told her the roof was failing. The furnace needed a $15,000 part. The property taxes had tripled. He made her feel like she was one missed payment away from the street, all while he was saving her. Loneliness makes dangerous choices feel reasonable. My mother wasn't stupid. She was just broken by grief, and Trevor had used that brokenness as a doorway. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch in the living room, listening to the new heater hum, and I felt a rage so cold it felt like iron in my veins. If you're listening to this and you're feeling that same tightening in your chest I felt that night, stay with me, because what I found the next morning at the Service Canada office changed everything. I took my mother there the next day. She didn't want to go. She was terrified. Trevor will be angry, she kept saying. He says I'm not good with these things. You're a librarian, Mom, I told her, my voice hard. You've spent your life organizing information. You're better at this than he is. When the clerk at Service Canada pulled up the records, the truth was even uglier than I'd imagined. The pension hadn't just been redirected to a joint account. It had been redirected to an account in Trevor's name only. The authorization form had been signed 3 years ago. My mother looked at her own signature on the screen and her face went gray. She remembered signing it. She remembered Trevor saying, "Just sign this, Sylvia. It'll make the bank stop calling you." She had signed away her life because she trusted her daughter's husband. I called Pauline from the driveway afterward. I didn't want my mother to hear what I had to say. Pauline answered, her voice already defensive. "I heard you were in town, Daniel. Why are you bothering Mom about the money?" "Bothering her?" I nearly screamed. "Pauline, she's living in a 14-degree house. She's eating crackers for dinner. Where is the money? Where is the $7,000 a month?" "You don't understand the expenses," Pauline snapped. "The roof cost $40,000. The taxes—" "Stop it," I cut her off. "I'm looking at the house right now. The roof is the same one that was there 5 years ago. Does Mom have access to her own money, Pauline? Can she go to the bank and take out $50 right now?" There was a silence on the other end of the line, a long, ringing silence. Then she said, "She has her allowance. Trevor says—" "She isn't a child," I roared. "She is 68 years old and she earned that money. I am going to a lawyer, Pauline, and if Trevor doesn't put every cent back, I'm going to the police." "Daniel, don't do this. You'll ruin my marriage," she whispered. "Trevor ruined your marriage the second he decided to starve our mother," I said, and I hung up. Desire whispers louder than guilt, and it was clear Trevor's desire for a lifestyle he hadn't earned had silenced whatever conscience he had left. But what about Pauline? Did she know? Or was she just another victim of his spreadsheets? The next 48 hours were a blur of adrenaline and legal documents. I found a lawyer named Frances Diacre Wu. She was a specialist in elder law, and she didn't mince words. She called it what it was. financial elder abuse. She told me that this is the silent epidemic of our country. It's the crime no one talks about at Christmas dinner because the perpetrator is sitting across the table passing the gravy. According to Francis, the missing money totaled somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000. Think about that number, $300,000. That's not a mistake or bad budgeting. That's a heist. That's a planned, methodical stripping of a woman's future. While I was in the lawyer's office, Trevor tried to call me. Then he texted, "Daniel, let's be adults about this. I have all the receipts. You're overreacting and upsetting Sylvia. Let's meet and look at the books." I didn't reply. I went back to the bank with my mother. We opened a new account, a clean one. No Trevor, no Pauline, just Sylvia Okafor Brennan. We filed the forms to redirect the pension back to her. The clerk, a woman named Deborah, looked at my mother's thin frame and her winter coat. She was still wearing it, a habit of fear she couldn't break. And Deborah stayed late to make sure the paperwork was filed instantly. When my mother signed the new forms, she didn't look at me. She looked at the pen in her hand. Then she looked at the bank's marble floor. "I feel so ashamed," she whispered. "Mom," I said, "the only person who should be ashamed is the man who took your food to pay for his car, because that's what we found out." The financial crimes unit of the Hamilton police moved faster than I expected. They found the money. It hadn't gone to roofs or furnaces. It had gone to a new SUV for Trevor. It had gone to renovations on a rental property he owned. It had gone to vacations in Mexico that Pauline had told me were gifts from Trevor's business partner. It was all a lie. Every luxury they enjoyed for the last 3 years had been bought with my mother's blood, sweat, and 30 years of library books. Trevor was eventually charged with fraud over $5,000 and criminal breach of trust. He didn't go to jail, not right away. He took a plea deal. He had to pay back $162,000, which was all they could legally prove was diverted. The rest was gone, spent on gas and dinners and lives that didn't belong to them. The hardest part wasn't the police or the lawyers. It was the day my mother had to face Pauline. My sister came to the house a week after the charges were laid. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. She sat at the kitchen table, the table where my mother used to help us with our homework, and she tried to explain. "I didn't know the extent of it, Mom. I swear. Trevor said everything was fine. He said you wanted him to handle it." My mother looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, the librarian was back. The woman of substance. "You saw me, Pauline," my mother said, her voice steady and cold. "You saw me wearing my coat in the house. You saw the empty fridge. You brought me groceries sometimes. Did you never once ask yourself why your mother, who has a $7,000 pension, needed you to bring her a loaf of bread?" Pauline had no answer. She just sobbed. I realized then that isolation isn't always a locked door. Sometimes it's just a family member who chooses to look away because the truth is too inconvenient. Pauline hadn't stolen the money, but she had let the theft happen because it made her life easier. Today my mother lives in a bright, warm condominium in Burlington. It's only 20 minutes from my house. The thermostat is set to permanent, toasty 20 seconds. Her refrigerator is so full the door barely closes. She has a financial planner now, a professional who doesn't share her last name and who doesn't need her money to pay for an SUV. But the scars are there. She still checks the thermostat 3 times a night. She still apologizes if she spends too much on a nice bottle of wine. Reclaiming your life after someone steals your agency is a slow, painful process. She volunteers now. She talks to other seniors about the spreadsheet trap. She tells them that love shouldn't require you to give up your bank password. She tells them that if a family member tells you, "Don't worry about the bills," that is exactly when you should start worrying. If you're reading this, I want you to do something. Don't just call your parents. Go see them. Go alone. Open the fridge. Look at the thermostat. Ask them, "Mom, Dad, do you have access to your own money?" It might be an awkward conversation. It might make them angry. But believe me, a moment of awkwardness is a small price to pay to keep someone you love from disappearing in their own home. My mother is warm now. She is taking up space again. She is no longer a shadow. And every Tuesday night, when we sit in her warm kitchen and eat a meal she paid for with her own hard-earned money, I am reminded of one thing. The truth doesn't just set you free. It keeps you alive. If this story opened your eyes to the reality of what can happen behind closed doors, please like and subscribe to help us share more stories that need to be told. Don't let the silence win.